Ball is a competitive turn-based board game for two players inspired by football, chess, checkers, and contemporary card games. To win the game, one of the two teams must score a touchdown. To score a touchdown, any player standing in their corresponding end zone must be in possession of the ball. Although there are 4 game modes, this video will present the standard mode with cards, as it is the mode that best balances strategy and tactics. Fair, challenging, and therefore the most competitive. Here is the initial setup. The attacking coach will be the one with a player in possession of the ball. Each coach will have 7 players, 7 boost markers, 7 cards, and 3 energy counters. Players and the ball will always occupy striped squares. They will never end a move or action on a non-striped square. Energy counters have their own section on the board. Each turn consists of 2 phases, the action phase and the unlocking phase. During the action phase, coaches will spend their action points to perform actions such as different types of movement, dodge, tactical dodge, fumble, forced fumble, block, protection, and 3 types of passes such as handoff, short pass, and long pass. As well as taking possession of the ball, although ball possession is not counted as an action. They can also spend the accumulated energy points to use their cards and perform complex action combos. In each turn, coaches can spend up to 2 action points. The use of energy points and cards can modify this logic. There are actions that have no cost in action points, and actions that, once executed, reward coaches with energy points. Before explaining how energy points and cards work, it is important to understand how action points and movement function. Although there are 3 types of players, all players have a common movement type costing 1 action point, which is moving diagonally 1 square. So, if I wanted to move a player 1 square diagonally to an empty square, I would spend one of my 2 action points. I would then have 1 action point left to spend this turn. However, if I spend 2 action points to perform an action, circle-type players could move 2 squares horizontally or vertically, meaning they do not pass through diagonal squares to reach their target square. X-type players could move 2 squares diagonally in any direction, but always in the same direction, that is, they cannot zigzag during a single movement action. However, square-type players can move by mimicking the movements of either X or circle-type players, that is, they can perform any of the movements I described, and furthermore, they can zigzag. If X or circle-type players were to zigzag, it would be considered 2 one-square movement actions and not 1 two-square movement action, which has its consequences. In gameplay terms, performing 2 one-square movement actions is not the same as performing 1 two-square movement action. During the action phase, whenever possible, coaches can perform as many zero-cost actions as they wish. This will allow them to create action combinations and accumulate energy points. To better understand what has been said, if, during their 2-square movement action, they pass over a square occupied by an opposing player, that action would be considered a tactical dodge or a fumble, depending on whether the attacked player is in possession of the ball or not, and would have a cost of 0 action points. This would allow the coach to perform more actions in the same turn. And in this case, it would add 2 energy points to their energy bar. All this would be impossible if spending 2 action points to perform 2 one-square movements for several reasons. The first is that if I perform a 1-square movement action and end this action on another player, that action will be a block or protection and it has a cost of 2 action points, so I would have spent all my action points. And the second reason is that, assuming that, by using some special abilities described on a card, I could consume more than 2 action points in this action phase and during this turn, and assuming the rules allowed me to exit a block outside the unlocking phase, which they do not allow, I would have performed 2 one-square movement actions to pass that piece and not 1 two-square movement action or more, so it would not be considered a tactical dodge. A moment ago, I said 2 squares or more, and that's because some special abilities allow performing a movement action of more than 2 squares that temporarily unlock new limits on the different actions. To use the abilities described on any card, you will need to spend energy points. Although when executing these special actions, it is possible to recover some of these energy points, or even all of them. The number of energy points required to perform a special action is defined on each card, next to the description of the ability. It is usually possible to spend as many energy points on a special ability as you want and can, increasing the potential of that special ability. How to spend more energy points and how those additional points affect the ability of the action is also described on each card. It is important to know this because once a card is used, the coach will permanently discard it at the end of their turn, and it will no longer be usable for the rest of the game. The markers placed at the base of the players indicate that these players are still able to perform special actions. Once they have spent their cards, the markers will be removed. The markers are a warning signal and a reminder for the coaches. Once the action phase is complete, we will move to the unlocking phase. During the unlocking phase, coaches must perform the unlocking or deprotection process on all pieces under their control or protection as long as they have not been blocked or protected this turn. It will not always be possible to unblock or deprotect players. Control or dominance is represented by positioning the player performing the action on the player to be blocked or protected. The unlocking phase is a series of movements that will have consequences on the opponent's next turn, and the coach who unlocks will be able to move the opponent's pieces at their convenience. Therefore, this is the only time we will have partial control of the opponent's pieces, representing the previously described dominance or control. Once our turn is over, the turn of the opposing coach will begin. Turns will continue until one of the two coaches scores a touchdown. Although this is a game inspired by football, chess, and checkers, there are numerous possible actions that could not be covered in a presentation video like this. So to avoid making the video much longer and to leave the viewer curious to know more about the game, we will conclude here the introduction to ball.